Investigators with the Easton, Pennsylvania Police Department have used cell phone data to place their primary suspects at the scene of Irvin Holton's murder.
We've got Patrick Hughes and Omar Robinson bouncing off the nearest cell tower.
However, the cell phone records also pose a problem.
Detectives found security footage that showed the two gunmen fleeing the scene together in a van. But the phone records showed Patrick and Omar's phone leaving in different directions.
So detectives are now looking for a third accomplice.
The obvious way to identify the third man would be to get Omar or Patrick to give up the name.
But despite repeated questioning, the men never identify the other gunman.
Neither one of them rolled on the other person that was involved.
It's disappointing, but detectives are still convinced they have the man who sent Omar and the second shooter to kill Irvin Holton.
Mr. Hughes had organized this. Mr. Hughes was the mastermind behind it.
He was so obsessed with Janice that he was willing to kill to have her.
Patrick Hughes and Omar Robinson are charged with first-degree murder.
Hughes was charged on the grounds of accomplice liability. If you aid and abet somebody in committing a crime, you are just as responsible for committing it as if you pulled the trigger yourself.
And on January 12, 2017, Patrick Hughes and Omar Robinson both stand trial for the murder of Irvin Holton.
In their opening statement, prosecutors told the jury that the murder was the work of a man driven by jealousy and obsession.
Janice Walters takes the stand and describes Patrick's obsessive behavior toward her.
One of the things that we're looking at is wanting to constantly control everything and all the people around you.
So the threatening letters he'd written her from prison are read in court.
He's writing these letters even though she's very clearly disinterested.
When he got out of prison, he just picked right back up with his compulsive behaviors.
And at some point, Patrick decided that the only way to keep Janice was to eliminate her new boyfriend.
Patrick killing Irvin could have been a threat and form of control for Janice to say, watch out, this is what can happen if you are with someone else.
To help make it happen, he recruited his friend, Omar Robinson.
He's got to go. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know about this, man.
Hey, you owe me.
If he had anything over Omar, he probably really used and exploited that.
It could be as simple as he owed him some money, or maybe he was bullied into doing it.
Don't sweat it. It won't be just you, okay?
But it wouldn't be Patrick at Omar's side when he shot Irvin.
Patrick Hughes had utilized Omar Robinson and a third unknown individual to actually perpetrate the shooting.
It's hard to understand how was he able to get them to carry it out.
He was that manipulative and that good at getting people to do what he wanted.
The prosecution believes that Patrick Hughes started to recruit accomplices right after his release.
He got out of prison and was outraged that his woman was with someone else and immediately began plotting Irvin's murder.
All they needed was the perfect opportunity.
They're not sure if Patrick had been stalking Irvin, waiting on the perfect time to do this, or if they just happened on him that evening. But either way, they decided to set their plan in motion on that Black Friday.
He's walking across the street right now.
Patrick guided the gunmen straight to Irvin.
Yeah, I'm walking up now.
He was taken down by getting shot in the leg.
And then the two gunmen moved closer.
Go, please, go! Go!
Prosecutors didn't know which man fired the fatal shot into Irvin's chest, but they knew who'd gotten them to do it.
It was clear Patrick Hughes was the reason Irvin Holton was being shot and killed.
The defense argues that the prosecution's case relies too much on hearsay, coincidence, and speculation.
The primary defense argument was to create reasonable doubt, to take each piece of evidence and isolate it from the rest. Try and say that they don't all add up to anything.
But the jury disagrees.
When you see how each piece of evidence connects to the other piece of evidence, you see beyond a reasonable doubt the guilt of these two people.
And after just 2 days of deliberation, Patrick Hughes and Omar Robinson are both found guilty of first-degree murder.
They were both sentenced to life in prison without parole. They will stay in prison until the day they die.
The second gunman, however, is still at large.
There's one person that's out there that was involved in this thing that's still walking around.
Police haven't given up on bringing that individual to justice.
But even bringing the third man to justice won't make up for what they took from Irvin's family, friends, and community.
Irvin was a single dad raising his daughter alone. She was already in a situation where she wasn't being raised by her mother, and now she loses her father to such tragedy.
Even though the case is over, even though justice was achieved and people were held responsible, it still doesn't bring back the victim.
He's known for being a protector to the people he loves. Among the people who know Chance, he's a gentle giant.
He's tall, muscular, black, big black dude, like a really husky guy. And so he could be intimidating just by his stature. But if you knew him, he's really like a big teddy bear.
A stranger came up, started arguing with Chance back and forth, opened fire, and then ran off.
He was just reaching out for me, like, I couldn't understand what he was saying. He couldn't really get the words out, but I just kept telling him I was there.
The family is just livid that nothing has been done.
A lot of the beef stems from one person having a beef with someone else, and now their whole family and friends are involved.
Sometimes the street has its own investigation and street justice is imposed, and it is almost always deadly.
That whole eye for an eye leaves us all blind.
At 3:30 p.m. on March 23, 2012, multiple 911 calls suddenly pour in from the 100 block of Kenmore Avenue on Syracuse's south side.
Syracuse is a small town. We have a big university. That's pretty much what we're known for, Syracuse University. Right outside, like literally down the street from the university, is the south side. Right below the university is poverty.
The south side of Syracuse is a high poverty area, a lot of violence. It can be scary. It can be scary for someone that does not know the area.
I was just fresh out of the academy as a police officer, and I remember the call, shots fired call came in, shooting, that a male had been shot. We were close by, so we were able to respond pretty quickly. So the scene was still very fresh, very chaotic, where people were outside, so there was people all over. The residents were pointing to where the victim was. I remember running up to the house, it was a white house, green porch, I'll never forget.
The victim, a black male in his 30s, lies just a few feet away.
There was a construction worker in the area that had quickly responded before we got there, and he was helping do some first aid. Then we took over, me and my partner.
He's shot. What appears to be, a single gunshot wound to his lower back.
There was still some level of consciousness. gasping for air. I remember that vividly. He grabbed onto the uniform and, said, "Help me."
Paramedics arrive, followed by several of the victims' family members who have gotten word of the shooting.
One of the first things we learned after talking to bystanders is that the victim is 33-year-old Chance Gathers.
He could see me. He was looking at me, reaching for me. He was just reaching out for me. Like, I couldn't understand what he was saying. He couldn't really get the words out, but I just kept telling him I was there.
As Chance is loaded in the ambulance, the responding officers attempt to speak with him.
The only chance we might have to identify the suspect would be from what the victim tells us.
But Chance can no longer speak.
Basically just gasping for air. He couldn't talk.
Chance David Gathers was born on October 14, 1978 in Syracuse, New York, to Onetha Gathers and Haywood Richardson Jr.
Chance Gathers is a native of Syracuse. This is his hometown. He's from a big family. Chance has 2 sisters on his mother's side, and on his father's side, he's one of 22 children. So this is a huge family.
He had a good relationship with his mom. He even had a good relationship with his dad. His dad had a lot of kids, and he did what he could. He was there for them.
He had the brightest, most beautiful white smile. Everything was funny. You know what I mean? It was always a joke. He asked a lot of questions. He was very observant.
While still a young man himself, Chance's siblings began having kids. Chance quickly became the favorite uncle.
He would go get a haircut. He would have to go grab nephews and little cousins and godsons and always have a bunch of kids with him getting haircut just every week.
Chance was like one of those warm spirits that, like you say, made me feel safe and, always inquired and always would talk to me and ask me what I was thinking, how I was feeling. His hugs were unmatched.
He's known for being a protector to the people he loves. He's sort of among the people who know Chance, he's a gentle giant.
He's tall, muscular, big black dude, like a really husky guy. And so he could be intimidating just by his stature. But if you knew him, he's really like a big teddy bear.
On the street, Chance learned to use his size to his advantage.
He was actually bullied a lot as a child, him and his big sister. They got into a lot of fights and picked on until it kind of made him like, okay, I'm gonna show y'all. And he had that chip on his shoulder for a long time. And it got him in prison, landed him in prison.
He was actually in jail for, I want to say 11 years he did.
At the age of 30, Chance was released, and he was determined to stay out of prison for good.
When he came home, that's that inner battle that he was fighting. Like who he truly was, that God-fearing, praying man, family man, versus not wanting to back down from what he might have used to be or what people perceive him to be. He really, that's not ever what he wanted, but he did have that battle. But some of the biggest things that he wanted to accomplish was to have his own family, raise his own family. He didn't have any children.
Within a couple of years, Chance felt steady enough to take a step in that direction. He started dating single mother Marisha Stenson.
Chance absolutely courted me. He was very persistent. And it was kind of matter of fact, we're together now. And it wasn't in a way where I was run, It was he was really serious about me. Any other connections that he had at the time, he clearly was look, I'm calling her, anybody, there's nobody but you.
We were talking, and he was like, yo, I love her. I love her. She's so beautiful. Yo, Nuno, you don't understand. She do something to me.
6 months into the relationship, Chance popped the question.
He wanted to get married. He told me our date would be June 1st. He set a date and everything. He was really romantic.
Before they could make it to the altar in April 2012, Chance and Marisha learned they were going to be parents.
When I finally did get pregnant, he was so happy. Like me, I'm like, oh, I got this 4-year-old already. I don't know if I really even need a baby, but if you're happy, I'm happy. Like we're doing this. But he was so excited.
He wasn't one just out here moving around with, having kids with different women and things like that. Like this was gonna be his first child. He was proud. He was excited.
Chances at this point, he's really looking forward to the next phase in his life. Him and his girlfriend are expecting a child, and that's going to be the biggest thing ever for Chance. This is someone looking ahead to a future with a child and a wife.
But just a few months into the pregnancy, a shooting in broad daylight has Chance fighting for his life. As doctors at University Hospital attempt to save the father-to-be, detectives arrive at the crime scene. They piece together the moments around the shooting.
He tried getting away when the suspect was shooting at him, and you could see that he was eating his food on the porch when that had happened. And it looked like he tried to escape into the backyard to prevent getting fired upon.
Instead, Chance was shot once in the back as he tried to flee.
We don't know where the suspect necessarily ran off to or if he ditched a firearm. So a scene like that, you end up taking almost the whole block that the homicide occurred on, putting up crime scene tape.
They began searching the entire block for physical evidence. Blood splatter, shell casings, things of that nature. They found multiple shell casings on the ground.
We have to figure out what happened. Everyone was still around, so we knew we had some witnesses.
A lot of people were there. It was broad daylight, so people saw this.
Witnesses eagerly point out a link between the gunman and the item police have just discovered.
Police discover a dark-colored cap, and after talking to witnesses, they discovered that it was the shooter's cap.
He had on a hat, a black and blue hat, and a white t-shirt.
If investigators can find the owner of the hat, they might also find the gunman.
Who would want Chance Gathers dead? Who is it that was so bold they decided to just go up to him in broad daylight and shoot him right in front of people?
When detectives looking into the murder of 33-year-old Chance Gathers speak to those who witnessed the brazen crime, they learn the shooter was wearing a dark hat.
If the lab team can find DNA on this hat that was found on the ground, this would be the key to identifying the shooter.
Witnesses give details surrounding the moment the chaos broke out.
Chance was hanging out with a small group of friends on that porch.
We were sitting on a porch, and this young man, came up and he went to go, shooting up on a porch.
Witnesses explained that they did not recognize the shooter. They described that a stranger came up, started arguing with Chance back and forth, opened fire, and then ran off.
Given the fact that no one else was shot, detectives believe the shooter was after one man.
This does not appear to be a random shooting. This looks like a targeted shooting, that someone was trying to very specifically mark this person as their victim.
With no witnesses able to identify the shooter, investigators consider whether they're holding back.
There's people who saw this shooting and they know what happened. Easy enough, right? Just talk to them, solve the crime, right? That's not how it works.
We don't tend to get a lot of cooperation from the community, especially in those high crime areas. So we've had incidents where there's been a shots fired and we'll show up and people sitting on the front porch will say they didn't hear or see anything. And just because you're wearing a badge doesn't mean that they're going to want to give information.
There's the don't snitch culture. It's not something that people are comfortable doing, and with good reason. Because if you go to the police and you cooperate and it's known, well, then there could be a target on you.
As investigators wrap up at the crime scene, Chance's friends and family rush to the hospital. They wait on pins and needles for news.
I ran to Upstate Hospital, like up the hill, full speed, no brakes, up the hill. And when I got there, a couple of my family was there. Some of his friends were there.
Nobody can answer questions. His mom gets there, a couple other family members get there. And, eventually they come out with the, I'm sorry, he didn't make it.
The bullet struck Chance in the lower back, and then it traveled up in his body, puncturing his kidney and his aorta, which caused him to bleed to death.
I've seen miracles happen at the hospital, but depending on that round and where it decided to travel in the body, it can just cause significant damage, which you don't have a chance to save.
In my eye, she just let out this like scream that like will make your skin crawl.
We just need you to identify the body. So his mother and I, we go to the room where he's like laying on a table, naked on the sheet. I mean, it was really hard. It was really hard because being pregnant by itself is already hard, but like dealing with grief and then not knowing what's next.
Word of Chance's passing reaches detectives.
Police were hopeful that Chance would be able to identify his shooter. But now they won't get that opportunity. Therefore, they must continue the investigation in order to get justice for Chance.
Who is this guy who walked up in broad daylight and shot a bullet, taking the life of Chance Gathers as he sat on a porch eating? Who is this person, and why did this person decide to commit this horrible act?
Still certain that Chance's death was a targeted attack, investigators take a look into his background. They learn that prior to his release from prison 3 years earlier, Chance had a reputation both on the streets and with police.
Chance Gathers was someone that was on law enforcement's radar. Just looking back, even when he was 14, there was some contact with law enforcement. So there had been a significant time period. If you'd mentioned his name in roll call amongst other officers, he was well known.
Police discover that Chance had a dark past. He had a criminal history stemming back all the way to 1999.
Chance has had some problems. He's been in a prison. He's been in prison for serious stuff.
Since his release, Chance walked a fine line between staying out of trouble with the law and on the street.
It's very difficult to get labels off of you when they're on. They're attached to you almost forever, unfortunately, especially in a small town like Syracuse. Everyone knows each other, so it's hard. And they talk. To some people, Chance did have a reputation for being somewhat of a bully, right? The way he explained it to me was like, and what I actually saw was that he would only bully bullies.
You couldn't come around Chance and front like you was this big dog. Because if you big dog, he wants to see. Show me you big dog. He was Mr. Size You Up.
Chance is looking forward to this new part of his life, but the old part of his life is still there, and he's not shying away from it. You know, the old days of Chance being a guy to be reckoned with, he's still very aware of it, and so are other people. And that reputation is going to lead, unfortunately, to some real beefs.
Detectives also learned that Chance's tough guy image hadn't completely protected him.
Chance was being both a participant and also a victim of crime. He had been slashed across his face in the past.
In 1991, Chance arrived at the hospital with a stab wound, but the details of that stabbing were never made clear to police.
Investigators consider whether Chance's killer was attempting to settle a score.
Due to Chance's extensive criminal history, the list of suspects was pretty long.
There's a thing called street justice, and unfortunately, there's no statute of limitations on it. If the street is viewing you as someone who's behind something and there's people that want to hold you accountable for it, unfortunately, that very often results in tragic death.
Detectives in Syracuse are trying to identify the man who fatally shot Chance Gathers in broad daylight.
The reality is that Chance's reputation is going to follow him. And because as much of a gentle giant as he can be, he wasn't always a gentle giant on the streets.
Detectives had their work cut out for them in order to narrow down the list of suspects. Detectives went down a list of anyone who could be seeking payback, and then they moved on and also eliminated anyone who had attempted against Chance's life prior to his death. Detectives worked their way down a list of people who may have felt Chance had wronged them, and one by one, they eliminated suspect after suspect.
And no one in Chance's circle is offering help.
No one came forward. It's either due to fear, it's either due to, well, let the police handle it. Well, the police need help with solving these cases.
A huge problem for police in upstate New York is getting community trust, because at the end of the day, to solve a crime, you need people to come forward.
2 days after Chance's murder, Syracuse police set up an anonymous tip line, hopeful that the promise of secrecy will encourage someone to come forward.
We have an app where people can send anonymous tips, and I can't even look up your name, even if you want to, but we give people that anonymous option.
Anytime you open up a tip line, you have to take the good with the bad. And now detectives are having to sit through information that's senseless and really has nothing to do with the case.
Most of the tips are dead ends, except for one.
Not only does this person say they witnessed the murder, they also say they recognize the shooter.
So there's a name making its way to police. Police are starting to hear the name Demetrius Hackett.
Demetrius Hackett was born on July 21st, 1992. The second son to Kimberly Freeman and Benjamin Hackett.
The Hackett family was very well known on the west side of Syracuse. They go back generations. Demetrius had an older brother named Pierre, as well as some uncles and many cousins.
A pivotal moment for the Hackett family came on February 23, 1997, when Pierre and Demetrius's grandmother, Virginia, was shot and killed inside her home. 2 of her teenage grandsons were also injured in the shooting.
It was later determined that the shooting was intended for another member of Demetrius' family.
The shooting threatened to shatter the Hackett family, but in the end, it brought them closer. Pierre took his role as older brother seriously. He was intent on keeping Demetrius out of trouble.
Pierre did have some run-ins with the law and was involved in some street activities, but his main focus was to ensure that his brother was not part of that lifestyle.
Investigators are puzzled.
Demetrius Hackett is someone who doesn't have a criminal record. He doesn't have a street reputation. It's the opposite. It's a 19-year-old kid who's a football player. He doesn't have any sort of rap sheet. He doesn't have any sort of violent reputation. He's a good kid. And he's someone who, at face value, is, why are you looking at this kid? He's someone who has his whole future ahead of him. And frankly, you know, why would he be involved in something like that?
Then detectives learned that the Hackett family had recently suffered another tremendous loss.
Demetrius' older brother, Pierre, was killed in a shooting in the same neighborhood just 7 months prior.
Investigators take a look at the case file on Pierre's murder. In that moment, the connection between suspect and victim becomes crystal clear.
And whose name appears at the top of the list as a prime suspect? None other than Chance Gathers.
Homicide detectives in Syracuse, New York, finally have a potential suspect in the March 2012 murder of Chance Gathers. The name Demetrius Hackett comes by way of an anonymous tip.
On August 1st, 2011, Demetrius Hackett's brother, Pierre Hackett, was shot and killed broad daylight in the city of Syracuse as he's walking down the street.
During the investigation into Pierre Hackett's murder, a name kept popping up: Chance Gathers.
Investigators dig into the case file.
Pierre Hackett was walking with his cousin, Leroy Hackett Jr., and Leroy's 2 children, leaving a store on the south side of Syracuse.
Suddenly, gunshots rang out.
Pierre told his cousin and the children to run to safety, and he then turned in the direction of the gunfire and was shot in the head once. His father, Benjamin Hackett, was sitting in the car and watched as his son was gunned down right in front of his eyes. A neighbor administered CPR until the ambulance arrived, but Pierre later died in the hospital.
Witnesses on the scene did not see the shooter, but all agreed the gunfire came from the direction of a nearby intersection.
The gunman used a pine tree at that intersection to stay concealed.
According to the report, Chance became a suspect when investigators learned of a beef between him and Pierre.
A lot of the beef stems from one wants to overpower the other, or one person having a beef with someone else, and now their whole family and friends are involved. You know, just the social pressure of, oh, if you don't take care of it, well, I'll take care of it.
It could be a beef over anything, a slight, a perceived slight, someone hitting on a girlfriend.
There were unrelated problems between Chance's friend Pep and Pierre's friend Suave. Pep and Suave were enemies because allegedly Pep shot Suave's brother Dave years prior. Suave and Pierre Hackett, they were beefing with Pep, so they still had active beef or whatever. And now Pierre is around or whatever. Pep is hanging with Chance.
In 2011, Pep asked Chance to come along with him while he attempted to broker peace between himself and Suave. When they arrived, Pierre was also there to back up Suave. But instead of striking a truce, tempers flared, mainly Pep's.
When they pull up, Pep started talking crazy, like complete opposite of what was supposed to transpire. And that commenced the beef between them.
Suddenly, Pierre and Chance were also mired in the explosive conflict. When Pierre is gunned down in broad daylight just weeks later, Chance's one-time friend turns on him.
Next thing you know, Pep is over there at the Hackett's dad's house telling them Chance did it.
The Hackett family took Pep's word for the truth.
The Hackett family is convinced that Chance has killed Pierre.
But Chance specifically told me out of his mouth, he said, man, I ain't do that, man.
Investigators working the case failed to find any evidence tying Chance or Pep to the murder.
As of March 2012, when Chance Gathers was gunned down, the murder of Pierre Hackett was still considered an open investigation.
Pierre's family is convinced Chance Gathers pulled the trigger that killed Pierre. The police are not so sure, or if they are, the police aren't bringing any charges. The family is just livid that nothing has been done.
especially Pierre's doting younger brother, Demetrius.
Demetrius is a very emotional guy. He's hot. He's angry. His brother was murdered. He is just completely devastated, as is his family. It's a horrible situation. Demetrius Hackett, someone with no criminal history, who under any other circumstances would never be looked at as a possible suspect in a homicide, is now looking like a prime suspect in the homicide of Chance Gathers. Because he blames Chance for killing his brother, and this is eating away at him.
There's now possible motive for Demetrius to want to retaliate against Chance. There's also a witness who identified Demetrius at the shooting. So now, Demetrius has to be brought in for questioning.
But when detectives go in search of Demetrius Hackett, he's nowhere to be found.
No one, not even his parents, seem to know where he's gone. They don't know if he's laying low, letting the heat die down, or on the run. The fact of the matter is that they cannot get any information as to his whereabouts. They knew that if they had any chance of finding him, they would have to get a warrant and the Marshal Squad involved, and hopefully get him in alive.
Grand Canyon University, a Christian university, is one of the largest and fastest growing universities in the country, supporting America's next generation of teachers, administrators, and education professionals. Students pursuing a Master of Education degree program online may be eligible to receive $3,000 to almost $6,000 off tuition. Find your purpose at GCU. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu/myoffer to see what you may qualify for.
He was a rising star on the local music scene.
He was known throughout the community.
The type of guy that men wanted to be and women wanted to be with.
But he was more than just a local celebrity.
He was raising his daughter on his own.
He was a good person, just doing right by the community and his family.
So when he's gunned down, shockwaves roll through the whole town.
911. Somebody got shot. Somebody got shot. Police find him life.
To find answers.
He was a pillar of the community.
They were starting out
A lethal conspiracy.
This appeared to be a targeted homicide.
They had the
Killers escape justice.
The investigators don't have any hard evidence. He was that manipulative and that good at
November 23rd, 2012. It's Friday evening in Easton, Pennsylvania, a charming city on the western shore of the Delaware River.
The city of Easton has some very old history. It's a small but fairly populous town.
When you drive through it, you feel like it's one of those places you'll see in a Hallmark movie.
It is very peaceful.
And on the night after Thanksgiving, many Easton residents are finishing up their Black Friday shopping.
Easton has been revitalized. There are so many wonderful restaurants and businesses in the downtown area.
Susan Thornton, however, is at home, waiting for her friend Irvin Holton to arrive.
Irvin Holton was a DJ, and Susan Thornton had agreed that Irvin could use her car to get all the equipment he needed to an event that Friday night.
They were good friends. She was helping them out.
And about 5:40, Susan gets a call from Irvin saying that he's arriving.
Hey, you almost here?
Yeah, I'm walking up now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be right there.
Yeah.
But suddenly, she hears a series of loud bangs.
Every year on Black Friday, there's an event in town to kick off the Christmas season.
But when she steps outside, she realizes that what she heard...
Susan opens the door and finds Irvin in a pool of blood.
He was shot multiple times.
43-year-old Irvin Holton was the kind of person who made friends everywhere he went.
He's a great guy.
He was always positive, always happy, the kind of person that anybody would want to spend time with.
Irvin lived in Easton, Pennsylvania for the past 20 years.
He liked the slower pace of life there compared to where he grew up in Washington, D.C.
He considered it his home.
Easton was also where he made a name for himself as a DJ.
Everybody refers to Irvin as DJ E, and he was known throughout the community.
When you came to one of his parties, everybody knew he was going to have a really great time.
But Irvin was adored by the community for more than just his DJing skills.
He was a giving person. He loved to entertain, not just for the local clubs, but also volunteering his time and his services for different parties and events.
Of his heart.
But there was something DJ E loved even more than performing: his family.
He was
very seriously. He made sure that aside from DJing, he took a factory job just to make sure that she had everything she needed.
She was just his whole world.
Because of his efforts, she excelled and was an honor student in her class.
Baby girl, a jacket?
Oh, thank you, Dad.
You're welcome.
But between raising his daughter and working 2 jobs, Irvin was left with little time for a love life until he met Janice.
Janice Walters was working as a waitress at a local restaurant.
She was working an event that Irvin was DJing, and he caught her eye.
Can I request a song?
Anything for you.
He has this presence of like a local celebrity. He really showed you what it means to be.
I usually don't call back, but for you, I will.
And before long, they were spending all of their free time together.
From the moment that Irvin met Janice, they were inseparable. It's like it just was magic. They had so much of a connection.
And to Irvin, Janice appeared to be the perfect addition to his family.
He was really building the life he had always wanted.
Oh my God!
But now, Irvin Holton has been shot down on the doorstep of his friend Susan's home.
Her first thought is to try to render him some type of aid.
Well, she grabbed anything she had handy to try and stop the bleeding.
Help! Call 911!
Thankfully, her neighbor was home and heard her yelling.
He was shot!
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Stay with me.
911.
Somebody got shot! Somebody got shot!
All right, where was he shot at?
He looks like he's shot in the chest. He's dying, man.
Easton police officers arrive at the scene within minutes, but they're already too late.
Police find Susan cradling Irvin lifeless in her arms.
Yeah. It's the county.
What's up?
Okay, there's been a shooting in Easton.
His person alive or dead?
Dead.
Irvin was declared dead at the scene, and homicide investigators were immediately called in.
And it doesn't take them long to rule out one theory.
When investigators searched Irvin's pockets, they realized that he had a wallet full of $150.
It was apparent that this was not a random robbery.
He was shot multiple times.
The last shot was fired at close range.
This was an execution.
"43-year-old single father Irvin Holton was living his dream in Easton, Pennsylvania as a popular DJ known as DJ E.
DJ E never let success and the admiration get to his head. He was humble enough to throw free parties for different events.
He's showing people you can be a business person, you can have fun, but you can still look out for your friends and community.
He was also looking out for his family.
Irvin was raising his daughter on his own.
He was a good person, just doing right by the community and doing right by his family.
And despite his busy schedule, he always made time for his new girlfriend, Janice Walters.
The relationship that Irvin had with Janice was a relationship where he could be who he genuinely was, different from what everyone saw in the spotlight.
But now, instead of building a future together, Irvin Holton lies dead outside his friend's home.
Irvin Holton was gunned down in the middle of the street on that Friday evening.
And Easton homicide detectives are quickly able to rule out a couple of potential scenarios.
When investigators showed up on the scene, they noticed that there were multiple gunshots to Irvin's body.
He had been hit several times in the legs, but the fatal wound was to his chest.
The shot to his chest wasn't just a drive-by shooting, it was at a point-blank range.
He wasn't shot by an armed robber either.
He had his wallet on him. He had cash in his pockets.
This wasn't a robbery gone wrong.
This appeared to be a targeted homicide.
As detectives examine the area around his body, they make another discovery.
Detectives found several shell casings at the scene, and they noticed there were 2 different calibers.
We've got 2 guns.
Yep. At the scene, it was determined that there was 2 shooters.
Somehow, these perpetrators knew he was going to be there.
Now the question is, why?
What's the motive for this horrific crime?
Who would intentionally kill a guy like Irvin?
They hope to get answers from the last person to see Irvin alive, Susan Thornton.
Susan was in a state of complete shock. Out of nowhere, she had to desperately try to keep one of her good friends from bleeding out on her doorstep.
For her to witness something horrific like that and to hold this gentleman in her arms, and when he's taking his last breath, for the rest of your life, that picture stays in your mind.
Pulling herself together, Susan tells investigators that Irvin wanted to borrow her car to get to an event he was DJing.
Susan Thornton had agreed that Irvin could use her car so he could transport all of his equipment to the show.
He called me right before he...
Did he seem upset at all?
No, he was excited for his show.
When detectives asked Susan, do you know of anybody that would want to hurt him? She said, no, this is a stand-up guy. He's loved by everybody.
But before detectives wrap up their interview with Susan, she is able to give them a name.
He's got a new girlfriend, too. She may know more.
She know her name?
Yeah, Janice Walters.
Investigators look at the person that's closest to them, the person that they spent the most time with, to get as much information as you possibly could.
Obviously, they wanted to talk to Janice.
Would you happen to have her number?
Yes, I do.
Detectives have their starting point, but as they're leaving the crime scene, they're handed a more promising lead.
A person approached the detectives on the scene.
He said he was with Irvin before the shot had happened.
Irvin had been hanging out with his friend Tommy Payne in a different section of Easton. Irvin needed to get over to St. Joseph Street so he could go visit Susan Thornton.
Tommy says he'd driven Irvin to a convenience store across the street from Susan's home.
They wanted to grab some beer to take to Irvin's show that night.
Mr. Holton walked in, he kind of made a loop through the business and then said to his buddy, hey, I'm gonna go across the street and pick up a car. And Tommy stayed there.
While he was in the store, Tommy heard a series of bangs.
Tommy didn't think it was gunshots that he heard.
I heard pop, pop, pop. I thought it was fire. I'm like, that's not ain't nobody shooting.
But just to be sure, he called Irvin's phone.
I said, let me call E to make sure, because that sound kind of close. I said, let me call E to make sure he's okay.
But Irvin didn't answer.
So Tommy actually walks outside and sees Irvin's collapse outside of Susan's residence.
I heard a scream, he was laying down.
But that wasn't all he saw.
He sees 2 figures dressed in dark clothing running from the scene.
He didn't see any faces or anything specific, but what he did know was that they were all dressed in black.
Whoever it was, they knew he was going to have to get that car. You just got to figure out, you know what I mean?
He explained to them that Irvin was a stand-up guy, and he didn't know anybody that would want to harm him.
With one possible exception.
He told police that the only guy that probably would have a problem with Irvin was Keith Poole.
He tells police that the two men had been in a dispute for a very long time.
But recently, the feud had escalated.
There was an altercation.
Keith pulled a gun on him.
He'd threatened Irvin's life.
The holiday times can be difficult for families if they've lost someone during that time frame because it is such a joyous time of the year. It's a time of celebration. We're preparing for Christmas. To have that happen during such a joyous occasion, it can affect the family for many years to come. The following year, they're thinking this is around the time that we lost our loved one, and it makes it even more difficult.
After 43-year-old Irvin Holton was gunned down outside an Easton, Pennsylvania residence, detectives are working quickly to find any lead to his killers.
Starting out with no leads in an investigation can be very frustrating.
Anyone could be involved in what happened here.
But now Irvin's friend, Tommy Payne, has just given detectives their first potential suspect.
Tommy was speculating that this could have been initiated by an individual he knew as Keith Poole.
Tommy tells the police that the two men had been in a dispute for a very long time.
But recently, the dispute took a serious turn.
He told me that he pulled the gun out on him.
What's more, Tommy claims to have seen Keith earlier near the scene of the murder.
He was around there earlier that day. Was with another guy in the car.
Thank you for your time.
Back at the station, detectives set their sights on Keith Poole, starting with his criminal history.
Keith Poole had had run-ins with the police, had done time in jail.
He'd gone to prison, but he'd been released on parole.
And when investigators comb through his social media, they discover a potential motive.
Janice Walters. Isn't that who Susan said Irvin was dating?
Yeah, I think it was.
Irvin had been involved in some level in a relationship with Mr. Poole's former girlfriend, Janice Walters.
Was it possible that the two men were feuding over Janice?
Detectives tried calling Janice to ask her to come to the station for an interview, but she didn't answer.
Hey, you've reached Janice. Sorry I missed you.
Trying to arrange an interview with Keith, however, is a little easier.
Keith is on probation. And when investigators contacted his probation officer, they found out that he actually skipped his meeting.
The meeting was scheduled for earlier that day.
Based on that information, officers issued a bolo for Keith that told police to arrest him on site.
While waiting to hear back from Janice and for Keith to be found, investigators searched for more clues in the 911 calls made around the time of Irvin's murder.
There were lots of calls that came into 911. Someone had to have seen something that was useful.
Luckily for detectives, one call gives them an eyewitness.
She was outside the same convenience store Irvin had visited just before his death when she heard gunshots go off.
I'm actually driving downtown. I heard the shooting and seen two black males running.
Her story matched what Tommy Payne told the police, but she was actually able to see where they were heading and what vehicle they fled in.
They ran over to Solomeo and got into a black Odyssey.
The woman's able to provide the description of the vehicle, although she couldn't make out the license plate.
With this new information, detectives hope area surveillance cameras can tell them more.
When detectives follow up with the restaurant, they discover that it had several surveillance cameras mounted around the building.
The managers for the restaurant were able to provide the footage from the day in question.
Like the caller reported, the video shows a dark van parked outside the restaurant shortly before the shooting.
Two individuals in dark clothing with hoods on exit the van.
Then the two men head off in the direction of the crime scene.
The two men begin jogging like they're in a hurry. And then they exit the view of the camera.
They aren't out of view for long.
Approximately a minute goes by, and these two individuals appear again.
The men re-enter the frame in a dead sprint back towards their vehicle, holding what police believe to be guns.
They are seen entering into this Honda Odyssey and driving away quickly from the restaurant.
The investigators are convinced these are the two men who killed Irvin.
But is one of them Keith Poole?
Detective Rush.
It's not long before detectives are able to ask him face to face.
Their bolo paid off. An officer was able to take Keith into custody.
When they sat down with him and explained the situation, he seemed genuinely shocked.
Wait, what? Y'all guys think I'm involved?
What were you?
No.
Keith tells the investigators there's no way he could be one of the killers. He says he was across town playing football with his girlfriend's kids at the time of the murder.
He also insists he had no reason to want to kill Irvin.
No. Listen, yeah, we didn't get along, but that doesn't mean I want the guy dead.
Mr. Poole indicated that the prior incident between himself and Mr. Holton was blown out of proportion, that he did not bear any ill will towards Irvin.
He told them that he missed his parole check-in because he spent the night with his girlfriend the night before, and they just overslept.
An officer will be with you shortly.
But Keith could be lying. So while he sits in jail for violating his parole, detectives check his alibi.
After speaking to his friends and girlfriend, they determined there's no way he could have committed the murder that night.
They were able to cross him off the list as a suspect in this case.
It takes the wind out of your sails. I got this guy in my sights, and it turns out that you're incorrect.
Still unable to make contact with Irvin's girlfriend, Janice, detectives try another approach.
Hoping to turn up some information, they reach out to the local news media and appeal to the public for help.
The effort pays off.
Detective Snyder.
They got a call from someone claiming to be one of Irvin's friends.
He tells police they should be looking at Janice's ex-boyfriend, Patrick Hughes.
And what makes you think he might have something to do with this?
He says that Janice had started dating Irvin while Patrick was serving time in prison.
He had been arrested on a narcotics charge.
But he'd heard that Patrick is out now.
Patrick had been released from prison a few weeks earlier.
Mr. Hughes was back in the area.
He wasn't happy that Janice had started seeing someone else.
The investigation into the shooting death of Irvin Holton hit a major setback when detectives learned their prime suspect, Keith Poole, had an airtight alibi for the time of the murder.
That's when a new tip comes in from one of Irvin's friends.
There's a possible connection of a scorned lover.
The caller tells police that Irvin's girlfriend, Janice Walters, previously dated a man named Patrick Hughes.
According to him, Patrick was angry that Janice had started seeing Irvin while he was in prison.
And you say he got out of prison a few weeks ago?
I'll check the data release.
Could Patrick be one of the men on the surveillance tape?
Do you know what kind of car Patrick drives? Is it a dark-colored van?
The tipster says no. However, he tells police that Janice's best friend, Melinda Owens, drives a vehicle that matches the description.
After the phone call, detectives reach out to Patrick Hughes to get him in for an interview.
They couldn't get a hold of Patrick, so they decided to look into the other lead that Irvin's friend gave them first.
They pay a visit to Melinda Owens' home to get a look at the car.
And detectives find it parked in front of her house.
It appears to be the same make and model as the one seen in the surveillance footage.
Can I help you?
Yes, ma'am. Is this your vehicle?
Yeah, what's going on?
When detectives explain, Melinda initially says that there's no way her van could be on video from that evening.
Went shopping that day, you know, Black Friday sales. Then I came home and that was that.
No. Dave, you don't remember?
But her boyfriend, Omar Robinson, tells her she's mistaken.
I had the van that night.
Mr. Robinson says, I actually had the van in the evening hours between about 5 and 6 p.m.
He says he had used the vehicle to drive to a gas station around sundown that night.
A gas station on the opposite side of town.
Yeah, he's right. I just forgot.
Alarm bells immediately start to go off for the detectives.
Was Melinda trying to cover for Omar by claiming she had the van all night? Or is Omar protecting her?
When you're in a relationship, you're inclined to protect your partner because that's what relationships are about.
Janice was Melinda's best friend. So was it possible that Janice had been avoiding detectives because she was involved in Irvin's murder?
Hoping to sort out the truth, detectives decide they need to talk to Melinda and Omar separately.
They confront Omar with the footage.
Let me show you some of the footage from that evening. See this van here?
He indicated to him that they had surveillance footage of the individuals who committed this murder running through the Solomeo parking lot and getting into a Honda Odyssey van, and that it was their belief that this van was the exact same van that was currently parked in Mr. Robinson's driveway.
He could tell Omar starting to get nervous.
Why don't you tell me what happened that evening?
Mr. Robinson indicates that they were mistaken about that belief and that he had nothing to do with this murder.
While detectives were suspicious of Omar, they had to check out his story before they could make an arrest.
For your time. We appreciate it.
After talking to Omar, detectives pay a visit to the gas station where he claims he was at the time of the murder.
None of the employees remember seeing Omar, and there weren't any security cameras that could prove he was there.
With nothing to back up his story, the investigators are even more convinced he's lying, but they'll need more evidence to make an arrest.
And a few days later, they catch their next break.
Patrick Hughes has been arrested on unrelated drug charges.
With Patrick in custody, investigators sit down with him for an interview.
So, did you know him at all, DJE?
Okay. Nothing about him. I know he spent records.
Patrick tells them that he hardly knew Irvin and denies playing any part in the murder.
He also denies being jealous that Irvin was dating his ex-girlfriend, Janice Walters.
Can you see somebody shooting somebody over a girl?
I see me shooting nobody over a girl.
But when the detectives ask him where he was on the night of the murder, Patrick doesn't have a good answer.
I might have been in the city. About 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Sometime throughout in that area. It was getting about dark around that time.
It seems like he's being deliberately vague about his whereabouts.
So we know you're in Easton. You're saying that's quite possible.
Exactly where I was doing what and what I can't specify that to you.
But detectives keep pressing.
Do you know Omar?
Some of my friends.
Yeah.
Did you see Omar and all that then?
Yeah, I don't know. We were talking about 2 weeks ago.
His response raises a red flag for detectives.
When detectives spoke to Omar, he didn't mention Patrick at all, let alone possibly hanging out with him on the day of the murder.
So you're saying you did not shoot E?
I'm saying I didn't have anything to do with none of it.
If Omar did, would you tell me? Say Omar was involved, just for the sake of argument.
I'm not going to say that.
Yeah.
I can't say that.
And again, Patrick insists he would never shoot someone over a woman.
If I wanted to get back with her, I would be talking to her. More than likely, I'd already slept with her. I don't want her.
With no evidence directly linking Patrick Hughes to the shooting, detectives sent him back to jail, charged only with a drug offense.
Police don't have enough to arrest either Patrick or Omar Robinson for murder.
Omar has no clear connection to Irvin at all, and Patrick insisted that he doesn't care about his ex dating Irvin. So neither man has a particularly compelling motive.
But finally, Janice Walters is back in Easton.
She was out of town visiting family for Thanksgiving when she got news of Irvin's death, and she decided to stay a few extra days.
And the reason why may give detectives their missing connection.
She was scared.
According to Janice, Patrick Hughes was obsessed with her.
Detectives investigating the murder of Irvin Holton have just discovered that his girlfriend's previous relationship with Patrick Hughes wasn't what it seemed.
Her relationship with Mr. Hughes was not a healthy relationship.
He was very possessive.
Janice said Patrick had abused her emotionally and verbally, and sometimes even physically.
I don't want to be with him by any means necessary ever. And I told him that numerous times.
And last year, when Patrick went to prison, she saw a chance to end it once and for all. But Patrick pushed back.
He continued to pursue Janice, even though it was clear that she wanted to move on.
He started calling me. I don't put any money on the phone.
So Patrick began flooding her with letters from prison.
Some of the letters are mean and nasty, and some are claiming me, and like, you'll see. Yeah.
Ms. Walters actually turned over all of those letters to Easton Police.
The letters make it clear Patrick was lying when he said he was over Janice.
He's not going to admit to being obsessed with this girl, but it's in the writings that he sent to her.
In these letters were professions of love. They were also filled with statements that were threatening in nature.
He felt if he couldn't have her, then no one else could.
And recently, Patrick's letters had become even more sinister.
Even after his most recent drug arrest a few days earlier, Patrick was still sending her letters from jail.
He was telling Janice that he wants to change and that he is done with shooting people and he wants to move forward with her.
When did he ever shoot anyone?
He was never charged for anything like that.
Was he referencing Irvin's murder?
So to mention shooting someone, it was almost like an unconscious confession.
Detectives will need concrete evidence to back up any suspicions.
They hope to find proof that would put both Patrick Hughes and Omar Robinson in the getaway vehicle used by the shooters, Melinda's van.
With the search warrant, police conducted a forensic search of the vehicle.
To the naked eye, it appears clean, but detectives have a theory.
When a gun is fired, chemicals are expelled in a cloud. Those chemicals can adhere to any number of surfaces,
including the hand holding the gun.
There's residue that's going to be on you and what you touch.
They swabbed the outside of the driver's door, the inside of the driver's door, as well as the steering wheel.
Detectives were right. The swabs pick up gunshot residue on the steering wheel.
Since Omar admitted he'd driven the van that night, it definitely connected him to the shooting, but it didn't implicate Patrick Hughes.
They needed something that would put Patrick with Omar on the night of the shooting.
So detectives turned to Patrick and Omar's phone records.
Whenever a cell phone is utilized, cell phones will bounce off of nearby cell towers. You can track the movement of a cellular phone as it bounces off different towers.
If you're making calls, it can tell you almost to the street where you're at.
The records clearly put Patrick and Omar in the area at the time the murder was committed.
Our two primary targets are close enough to where Irvin Holton is shot and killed that they were bouncing off the nearest cell tower.
They were in almost constant contact around the time Irvin was killed.
If you're involved in a crime with someone else, you want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Even more telling is the gap in their communications.
There's a block of time at the exact moment where the individuals are seen on camera running through the parking lot. There is no activity whatsoever on the phones. Then 10 minutes later, they pick up again. But during the time when Mr. Irvin Holton was murdered, nothing.
For detectives, it's a smoking gun.
Aside from the information from Miss Walters, the letters that they collected, aside from the video surveillance, now they've got the cell phone records, putting our two prime suspects not only in the vicinity, but communicating extensively with one another right before and right after the homicide.
But then they realize there's one problem.
The cell tower hit showed that after the shooting, Omar's phone left the scene in the opposite direction of Patrick's.
Which means Patrick Hughes wasn't in the van.
He was driving in a separate vehicle.
They know Omar was the one driving the van, which meant Patrick was not one of the gunmen. He was just the ringleader.
Omar and another individual actually did the murder.
One of the killers was still on the loose.
U.S. law enforcement can quickly obtain a person's cell phone data as long as they can provide specific evidence that the records are relevant to an investigation. In 2020, Verizon alone received nearly 250,000 requests for such data through the means of subpoenas, warrants, wiretaps, and more.